Hi all, welcome to EPG Pathshala of my favorite subject called Geography, and that too of Resource Geography. I'm Dr. Seema Mehra Parihar, who has been teaching Resource Geography for last 30 years in a central university called Delhi University, and also involved in research, direct, indirect, in convergent projects, dealing with natural resource management and using remote sensing GIS technology. I've got my postdoc also in resource geography and resource management techniques and technologies, and that's something what we are going to go ahead and learn today. This section takes us to research methods and hypothesis in resource management. The learning objectives are that after studying this, you would be able to understand the need and definition of research in geography, appreciate the different methodology involved in resource management, and also discuss the hypothesis involved in resource management. The key words for this paper are epistemologies, research design, deductive reasoning, hypothesis testing, conventional wisdom, and all this together in the context of resource geography and resource management. And this is something which will take a journey in this particular lecture. So now, what is research? Research comprises of creative work undertaken on a systematic basis in order to increase the stock of knowledge, including knowledge of humans, culture, and society, and the use of stock of knowledge to devise new applications. We have to be systematic. We need to recapitulate what we learned before. That is, all the Zimmerman's model, resources are not they become. Resources are the mediations act of somebody else. We need to reaffirm what we have learned till now. We need to work and develop new theories and models. Yes, you and me can develop new models also. A research project also we all can have. We can expand on our experience in the field. And the research projects can be used to develop further knowledge on a topic. Or in the example, like, in all those universities set up, where what all you learn, all those new things which you learn are part of research. Even small data that you collect is part of research. And to test the validity of the instruments, procedures, or experiments, research may replicate elements of prior projects, or they can add new value to it. And the primary purpose, of course, is different from primary research and applied research. And documentation, new interpretations, research development methods are also important and added to the new human knowledge, and that is what research is. Approaches to research depends on epistemologies, and which definitely vary considerably with ideologies, and also with different humanities discipline and the physical sciences discipline. There are several forms of research. It could be scientific, humanities oriented, artistic and creative, economic, social oriented, business marketing oriented, practitioners research field, life technologies, for me and you, and that's something what research is all about. It could simply be also database management. We need to be either subjective or objective towards what we do, but we need to be very clear about our objective. Research methods has to be empirical in the way as to encompass all the spatial variation within a resource framework. Research methods can be both specific and generalized. Just remember that. Data forms the basis of any research, and data only becomes a knowledge if you and me do it together. As such, it has to be ubiquitous, everywhere present, and data generation is an art, is a purposeful activity, and must be governed by the task in hand. This means that data can lead multiple lives. When I say that, sought after some purpose and spurned for another. There's a disaster, I may go to the Water Resource Ministry and say, please give me your data. The unmodified principles which are there, we need to also work towards it. We need to shape our learning and towards it. And which tools are we using? Whether we are using high technological tools, or I'm using indigenous methods, or I'm using traditional methods, my research results will depend on that. And so meaning of the research, my friends, is not very great. It's not something, which only few high lauded persons with degrees can do it. You and me or everybody around us can do research and can add value. We need to create our own mechanisms to solve research. And so what we find is that research itself is undefined, as though we all, add a value and we all add our own meaning and significance to research. So the greatest wisdom in research is to be able to tell the difference between methodologies and techniques that are used because they are genuinely appropriate, and those which are used because that is what the research community currently expects from us. We all need to be accurate. We all need to be aware. Awareness of this kind comes largely, of course, from experience, because that guides us what is right, what is wrong. The point that I want to make to all my geography students is simple, that at all levels, we have to be very conscious of our methodological concepts. The term researcher might seem rather grandiose for people coming to terms with the basic practical exercises for the first time, but all exercises that you and me do anytime to collect, data is a part of the research domain. Preparing an essay or a seminar paper is also a research exercise in its own right. So do not think that what I'm doing is not research. The term research design will be used for all embracing strategic processes, and project design will be employed to cover the narrower tactical issues of putting the research design into practice. So my friends, we all have to be very clear about the methodology and the research. All research projects or research exercises or research-based tasks should definitely tackle the questions by framing and testing hypothesis. What is a hypothesis? Hypothesis is a simple proposed question. Either we have a research question or we have a hypothesis. We are there to discard few ideas, accept few ideas, and we all need to take it forward. And that's something what is hypothesis all about. A major logical issue we must look at before going further is the choice between the two types of reasoning, either inductive or deductive reasoning. Both forms of reasoning can be used to test and formulate hypotheses. Inductive reasoning, broadly speaking, works from the particular to the general. One form of inductive reasoning is the method immortalized by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle in the Sherlock Holmes stories, where the fictional detective builds up a composite picture from a series of individual observations to produce a striking solution to a problem. Taking a more mundane spatial example, one might want to find out which mode of transport students use to travel long distances. It could be bus, it could be own vehicle, it could be train, it could be a plane. Working inductively, one would survey users of all the main transport forms and use the findings to assess the preferences of all the student users where one uses inductive reasoning. It is inevitable that the hypothesis is not formulated until there is a body of data to work from, and you're very clear about your objective also in mind. Coming to deductive logic, it works from the general to the particular and uses general rules or laws to test individual cases. If one uses deductive logic, it will set up a framework in which certain hypotheses are premises from the conclusions which can be drawn, illustrated, elucidated in any form. Say for example, if A and B, then C, returning to the student travel example, one might develop a structure like this. Coaches offer the cheapest long distance form of travel, a premise A. Students always use the cheapest form of travel, premise B. Students traveling long distance go by coach. That's a conclusion C. So if testing of the hypothesis satisfy that the premises are true, the conclusion too can be accepted as logically correct, and these in turn can be used as premise in further deduction. So, inductive approach or the deductive approach, it could be either, and both are correct. So, a research hypothesis it normally perform a variation on this theme by defining the initial conditions, then using evaluation of conclusions to test a hypothesis about the intervening state. It is normal to set out the hypothesis in advance of the process of data generation. Remember, data generation is very important. And from the emerge, the gradually named hypothetic deductive method is the one which comes. Hypotheses are tested to see whether or not they can be disapproved. In the case of our student travel example again, if we find that all our surveyed students travel by coach, we can uphold the hypothesis at least for the time being. If we find one individual student traveling by rail or boat, we must discard it and find an alternative. This is not the place for a prolonged discussion of methodology in resource management. That can be found elsewhere. What is important here is to see how the argument about methodology is there and we are following it. The geographer's habit of referring to quantitative and qualitative approaches focuses on the differences between techniques which evaluate variation in numerical value and those that do not exist. And this is something which we'll do in detail in the coming lecture, which is on approaches in geography. So what you find for resource management? So hypothesis is a fundamental use of hypothesis. Testing is to draw some inference about a larger body of unobserved data. That is the population from a sample of any other observation, maybe from a small region, village, taluka, or a state, or a district, or a state, or a nation, and all that. And that's something which is very important. So another statistics is the one which we all also be very clear. And today what we have is a geoanalytics. Theory suggested by the phrase, so now we have null hypothesis. It has a basic form. There is nothing going on here but the generation of random motions in what the investigator thought was a causal space. Because there is a great deal of random motion in social life, we all agree. And because there is a great deal of random noise in social science techniques of observation, again we agree for this also. Every social science findings has to show that it is not likely to be simple noise. There is a learning there, there is a research involved there, because that alternative theory is one of the few in social science that is well formulated mathematically. It is in general the hardest for ordinary social scientists to learn. And I think so, social science, that's the reason why research is so important in geography. In other words, hypothesis is a testable proposition derived from a theory, logic, or existing knowledge. If tested with proper rigorous methods, the proposition will provide information that adds useful knowledge and contributes to theory. A hypothesis is not exactly the same as hunch, an argument, or an assertion. The hunch that comes from intuition is a valuable element of creativity, but it must be clearly connected to existing knowledge and translated into a testable proposition before it can be considered a hypothesis. Remember, tested. Assertions and arguments are ubiquitous. Intuitions are ubiquitous, but they rarely involve propositions that can be clearly tested with legitimate methods or credible evidence. And that's so important. I need empirical evidence. Hypothesis testing refers to two distinct approaches in social research. One approach is usually understood in a broad qualitative sense, while the other is usually described in narrow quantitative terms. It is remarkable that despite many new developments over the past so many years, one fact looks very much the same. Populations are growing most rapidly, where such growths can be afforded the least. India, China, if you think of it, my own old Malthus theory reminds me that the stresses were also recognized then. But today the meanings, the quantum, everything has changed. We'll be moving, surpassing China also. So now let's work on rhetorical hypothesis. First, a hypothesis refers to a rhetorical approach. Now what is it? It's something that's so important. It is a technique of persuasion that involves an attempt to gain credibility by establishing common ground with the reader or listener. And that's something which is there. The word hypothesis comes from the Greek hypothesis, which in turn comes from the Greek hypothethania, to place under, which came from hypo, under, and tethania, to put under. And that's something which is so much is there. To advance a hypothesis is to put forward a postulate, an assumption, or a supposition. And that's something which is definitely there. In many areas of scholarly research and even geography research and policy discussion, participants quickly learn that they agree on many aspects of the issue at hand. And indeed, there may be a consensus that is so broad that it approaches what many people call it a conventional wisdom. And conventional wisdom is something, which we all are so often hearing around us. And sometimes, and My friends, just remember, you may find that education has got nothing to do with this conventional wisdom. Some people, just with their own experience, may have a wisdom much more than somebody with many degrees and accolades. So, but definitely, if it is there, some would agree for it, some would not agree with it. But the points of disagreement are crucial and we need to note it. And narrow disputes can easily overshadow points of agreement. So what is important is to have and form a consensus and healthy disagreement also. However, always require at least 3 preconditions. First, the rhetorical hypothesis must be presented in the logic and language of critique or the opponent. To earn the trust of the audience, one wish to engage, one may have to speak in their language, one need to appeal to things they find convincing. You need to find common ground, my friends, and that's something so important. Second is the rhetorical hypothesis must strike a tone of fairness and impartiality. Can we be fair and impartial? We need to do it if we want to do systematic research. And again, careful consideration of the sensitivities of the audience is so important. In some cases, the best move is an attempt to achieve rhetorical neutrality. A rhetorical hypothesis is not an infallible guide to perfect knowledge, but it's definitely a legitimate attempt to build common grounds in the search for better knowledge, new knowledge. The stronger the foundation of your hypothesis, the more your audience will feel compelled to follow the logic of your arguments and interpretations. Third is, the hypothesis must be clearly testable. You do not have to specify all the detailed methods the first time you propose a hypothesis. Indeed, it is common to have hypotheses and methods appear in different sections. But there should be sufficient information in the presentation of the hypothesis to make it clear that the proposition is testable and that there is a reasonable body of evidence on which to base conclusions and inferences. An untestable hypothesis is pretty much the same as an assertion or ideological statement for certain audiences. The diplomatic, fair, and testable hypothesis is absolutely crucial. Just remember that what we need is, we need something which is logical, which is systematic, and which we all can find empirical evidence. We all can use correct methodology. We all can use correct technological tools, and to take a journey of that research in collecting database which we can generate new knowledge. So, my friends, what have you learned till now in this chapter? You have learned approaches to research which all definitely depend on epistemologies and which vary considerably both within and between humanities and sciences. Pure sciences may only come out with work which is there in a closed wall of the laboratory, whereas for geographer, you all are very lucky that you picked up the subject. You all can have lovely fieldwork experiences, and even if, my friends, you all are using remote sensing, how can you forget the collection of GCPs? What is GCP? Ground control points. And from where will you get them? You will get them from your visits in the field, and you have to attach that ground control points knowledge in your database and in your raw data also, say of remote sensing, high resolution imageries. So that's something which you all have learned till now, that there is a difference between humanities and sciences based research. And geography, we all know, is a discipline that is, you're having some touch of humanities and some touch of sciences. So my friends, you all are lucky. You can, looking at your problem, if you're working in social geography, you're working on anything, you're working on natural resources, you're working on a social topic, move towards the humanities approach. You're moving in a physical, geographical arena, go to the scientific, little more scientific approaches. So what we have learned is that there is a difference. And we all have to learn that, and we all need to take it forward. A major methodological issue also we've learned about, we must look at before going further, is the choice between inductive and deductive reasoning. My friends, Be clear. Both forms of reasoning can be used to test and formulate hypotheses, but in quite distinct ways. Inductive reasoning, broadly speaking, works from the particular to the general, and the other one is general to particular. So that's something which is so important. Another thing that we learned is the rhetorical hypothesis must be presented in the logic and language of critique or the opponent. To earn the trust of the audience one wishes to engage, one may have to speak in their language, and that's something which is so very important. What I want to say by now is, learn and remember that research is a beautiful thing. Unless and until you do that, you cannot take a journey of new learning or even to motivate yourself. For me, any subject that we do, and resource geography, which I love, and I think so by now you also would have started loving the subject because you all can have a luxury and you all cannot survive without a resource. Because that's something what we all are. I mean, in case if I want you, and I tell you that please live without resources, can you? Can you imagine your children living without resources? How can this sustainability be achieved? How can we take this journey of the development of the world forward? We can only take the journey forward if you and me and the people around us all promise that we want to unveil this horizon of those gambit of neutral resources which are around us and work on different research problems, generate new hypotheses, test them, evolve new database, recommend new methodologies and processes, and come with results which are logical, which are testable, which are accepted by one and all, and is unbiased, is truthful, honesty coming out of my new research, we would be able to make this place, this world, a happier place. And we'll be able to contribute, not only as geographers, but we'll be able to justify our own presence in this world and thank the Almighty who has given us place in this generation. So please work towards it, and in the next chapter, you'll be taking this journey forward by learning about different 7 approaches for resource management. Enjoy doing your research, enjoy resource geography, and all the best. Thank you.